All right. Thank you so much to everyone who is in our little attendee list right now. Super appreciate you tuning in virtually. And thank you as well for waiting a couple minutes while we worked out some technical kinks. This is the joy of virtual events. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Rowan Walrath, and I am the editor of Rhode Island Inno. Rhode Island Inno is a news and events platform dedicated to covering startups and innovation across the Ocean State. We're also part of American Inno, which is a larger network of 14 markets and growing that tries to catalyze innovators nationwide. And here in Rhode Island, we do that in a couple of ways. The first and foremost is The Beat. It's a newsletter that goes out every Tuesday afternoon that I curate and write. And you should consider it your one-stop shop for everything happening in the Rhode Island startup scene. You can subscribe to The Beat by going to rhodeislandinno.com, where you'll also find original coverage of startups, fundraising, issues in the ecosystem, and more. And we also try to connect and catalyze innovators through events like this one. So this is our latest virtual State of Innovation, how startups are future-proofing for 2021. Now, I feel like I don't even need to say that it's been a year like no other. The pandemic has uprooted every aspect of our personal and professional lives. It's driven our workplaces and our schools to brand new remote models, upended entire economic sectors, and exposed plenty of cracks in our systems. But it's also high time for innovation. Business leaders are beginning to draft plans for 2021, and I'm super, super excited to get into exactly what that looks like. Before we get started, I do want to take an opportunity to thank our founding partner, Cox, without whom this event would not be possible. Thank you so much. All right, and thanks to you who are just tuning in now. I've already introduced myself, but I'll kick it over to our panelists so each of you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your startup before we dive into our questions. Rosie?
Hi, my name is Rosie Mangiarotti. I am the founder and CEO of Perkies. Perkies creates innovative solutions for women's undergarments. Our signature product is the Perkies Sticky Bra. For those of you who are unfamiliar with a sticky bra, it's a backless and strapless bra. I have one right here. And it sticks directly to a woman's breast. And the inner shells are typically painted with adhesive, so the user can only get a solid 2 or 3 wears out of it. So my idea is to create sticky bras with removable and replaceable adhesives. So the user could have a fresh stick as needed, a clean bra, and a bra that doesn't fall off on the dance floor. And it's an overall a more sustainable and affordable option for the users. So I've been working on that since a class I took at Brown my junior year, and I'm currently taking pre-orders and planning for a more formalized spring launch.
Awesome. Michael, how about you?
Yeah, so my name is Michael White. I'm actually the co-founder and CEO of Cress Health. And essentially what we do at Cress is our digital technology company that focuses on mental health and really increasing accessibility to mental health resources for all. So to this, we've actually developed 2 digital mobile technologies. One is the Cress application, which over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've really been utilizing to help our healthcare workforce. And also the Kerlyne application, which we developed to help all individual self-care with the emphasis on young adults to enhance their mental wellness.
Awesome. And how about you, Kerlyne? Tell us a little bit about your startup.
Hi, so my name is Kerlyne Jean-Baptiste, and I'm the founder of KerlyGirl. KerlyGirl is a natural hair care venture that caters to folks with coilier textures with our organic and plant-based products. We've been in the market since 2018, and we're really unique and stand out because we brand to folks who are underrepresented within the natural and beauty space. So dark-skinned women, women with coilier hair, trans and non-binary folks, as well as fat men.
I love it. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. I'm excited to talk about what our plans are for the next 12 months. So as I already mentioned before, 2020 has really been a year like no other in so many ways. And yet we are just a couple of months away from the start of 2021. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned this year that you're planning on carrying with you?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start it off. So I think something that I think really what COVID-19 kind of showed for us, both as a company and honestly, I think this transcends across multiple industries as well, is really the importance of adapting and almost like rolling with the punches. I think really COVID-19 was just such an incredible crisis that no one could have predicted. It almost put us on equal footing in that way. So I think what it showed us as a company is that we had essentially what we felt was a resource that could help individuals enhance mental wellness. But once we really saw sort of the full brunt of the COVID-19 pandemic, that's when we really said, how can we kind of innovate to make this a more timely solution for what is needed right now? And that's what motivated us to really utilize it for healthcare workers and hospitals, especially during the earlier parts of the pandemic, where there was just a tremendous inundation of patients in hospitals that led to a tremendous amount of psychological burnout and trauma amongst our healthcare workforce. And I think, like what that kind of showed is just that, because it was so rapid, many innovators back then were focusing on the physical wellness. How could we increase personal protective equipment for our nurses? How could we increase the capacity of masks, surgical gowns? How could we increase the number of ventilators that are producing? But no one was really focusing on the mental wellness side, but which we felt was equally as important. So I think, kind of what we took is just, having kind of almost like thinking quick on your feet, like being able to utilize your current resources and adapt it to new consumer problems and new consumer markets that you may not have really anticipated earlier on.
Definitely. I think one of my biggest learning lessons on a personal level, but then on an organizational level with KerlyGirl is just building resiliency and building that resiliency to our community. COVID-19 hit the African American population disproportionately and so harshly. And so being a company founder and serving to mainly Black women, it just really put things into focus for us and what we should have been, what we needed to focus in terms of our branding and our marketing. And a lot of that was beyond just the hair tutorials, but also community work and community organizing. And we made sure to do that in our social media.
Yes, I agree with both Michael and Kerlyne. Just the importance of being resilient, being relentless. And I think entrepreneurs kind of have an upper hand in this because we're kind of used to things going wrong and rolling with the punches. So I personally don't expect things to ever go as planned because you'll definitely be let down if you do expect things to go as planned. This woman who I recently spoke with, Stephanie Morimoto, she's head of the company, etc. She has a great quote. She says, "Have big goals and a plan, and then fully expect things not to go according to that plan. It's important to have a North Star goal, but flexibility in how you get there." So just like having that North Star goal is awesome, but you need to be flexible in order to get there. And yeah, COVID's definitely proved that.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like I keep having these conversations where it's like nobody pivots like an entrepreneur does, truly, because you have to roll with the punches because there are going to be punches, whether that's a pandemic or an investor pulling out or, a necessary change to your business model. And so I think this is just kind of like a heightened response to those things in some ways.
And I think, just kind of bouncing off Rosie and Rowan's point, I think, that really reminded me, it's not only sort of like rolling with the punches, but I also think startups and entrepreneurs especially are really well adapted just because of, the organizational structure. I know like the age-old analogy, a large enterprise organization is almost like they have a turning radius of like a battleship. It takes a very long time for them to kind of, do bottom-up research, like assess like market opportunities and react to it. But as a startup, I think what's great is that, although it's a smaller organization, I think that really allows you to be in a position to adapt. I think that's just as important. And I think something that really got highlighted in COVID-19, especially, amongst the past couple months, was really sort of the, I guess, almost a little bit of a downfall of like really age-old enterprise companies in favor of, I guess, younger companies. For example, when United Airlines got shifted out of the NASDAQ for DocuSign. I think that was a tremendous just epitome of like what is going on in terms of our innovation ecosystem and sort of a very good, I guess, like predictor for the future economy as well.
100%. I do want to remind our audience members before we get too far into our panel discussion, we are going to be doing an audience Q&A at the end, and you are welcome to send your questions throughout our discussion. Just as you think of them, type them in the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel, and we will take a look at them at the end here. All right. So there are so many huge factors that could affect business right now. We have the pandemic, we have a looming election. How does that shape your day-to-day life inside your company? What are you telling your teams and your partners?
I guess I'll speak to this one. Oh, Kerlyne, are you gonna go? Or do you want me to go?
Oh, I thought you were gonna go.
Oh, okay, I'll go. Yeah, so basically, I mean, I personally think just like controlling the controllables. Obviously, go out and vote. That's so important. But it's so important just like put one foot in front of the other and control what you can control. Otherwise, you could totally get caught up in being really upset, or it can cause stress and anxiety when you don't know what the future is going to hold. My dad would always say, whenever I was stressed in college with school and lacrosse, he would say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And it's so important, just like chip away at it, one foot in front of the other, and just not get these anxious feelings, because again, we can't control it all. So it's important to control the controllables. That's my mindset.
Yeah, and I think you know, what Rosie just said really, I guess, resonates with me in particular, is because, you know, that's something that we've heard you know, so frequently during the pandemic. You know, it's been really tough, you know, especially for college age students. You know, campuses shut down really rapidly. You know, social distancing really isolated us from our friends and a lot of our community. And you know, although, you know, Zoom meetings are one thing, there's no such thing. It's not any replacement for, you know, just a face-to-face conversation. And I think, you know, that's something that's really important, I think, especially during, you know, political and a political climate like this, to really make sure that you're taking care of yourself first and foremost. I think, you know, it's so tough to, I guess, be overwhelmed, since there's just so many things to be overwhelmed about right now. I think it's so important to say, you know, like Rosie said, take things like step by step. You know, don't let yourself, you know, don't beat yourself up. I think just being very kind to yourself in general, I think, is really just so important. You know, giving yourself leeway, saying, hey, like, I'm doing the best I can right now. Like, this is an unprecedented time, and you know, I should treat it as such. I think it's so important. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to echo Michael's and Rosie's sentiments on just the importance of company culture and really reprioritizing health and compassion within your company culture. I was on a call with Emily Weiss, and she was emphasizing that, you know, in the next 10 years, the future of the workplace will look so different to what we've experienced it in the last 10 years. And COVID-19 really is, I guess, the marker of why, why, you know, health and mental health should be a nexus in how you interact with your employees, how you interact with your partners, and how we will interact in the workplace. You know, in 10 years, maybe your first hire or your key hire will be a chief people officer rather than, you know, a marketer. So yeah, that's what I really found, you know, really just centering in terms of not only how I interact with, you know, our key stakeholders and our employees, just really checking in and being like, how are you doing? If you need more than 2 business days, that's totally fine. You know, there are things culturally happening that does slow down your workplace. I mean, even today's the first day I've done my hair since I found out about, you know, the Breonna Taylor decision. I mean, I've still been productive naturally, but, you know, everybody's just, like, is going through it. So really just being compassionate and thinking about folks' health is important.
Yeah, we're all humans before we're workers, and I'm hoping that people remember that. Kerlyne, you talked briefly about the future of the workplace. I want to zoom out a little bit on that, from the workplace to the innovation economy of Rhode Island as a whole. So Rhode Island's startup scene is in the midst of a transformation itself. And startup leaders are beginning to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion in their own business practices, as well as how we form community and support one another. What changes have you seen so far that you're hoping will continue into next year and ideally beyond?
Yeah, I think, Rhode Island has always been ahead of the game because we've always prioritized our people and community in every framework of our work. And that's not the cultures of a lot of different entrepreneurial ecosystems. A lot of entrepreneurial ecosystems value money and how quickly you raise that money. And while that is important because you need to be able to pay your employees in capacity, there are new frameworks in the ecosystem in terms of social innovation, in terms of social impact, or just, sustainability because we need an earth. And Rhode Island has a really great opportunity to be a vanguard in that. Because as we bring in more diverse perspectives in multiple markets, Rhode Island is making a lot of headway in blue tech and in med tech, and I'm hoping we can do the same within the CPG market. As we bring in more diverse perspectives, we're able to bring in more sustainable perspectives because we're always centering people and people's needs. So I'm really excited as a young entrepreneur. I'm 25 years old to be a part of the ecosystem and be a part of the conversation.
Awesome.
And I think it's it's so interesting that Kerlyne mentioned really just the importance of diverse perspectives, both in terms of like companies and I think the one thing I think really that's special about Rhode Island especially is just how willing entrepreneurs are willing to help other entrepreneurs. I think that's so important. I mean, especially I think I consider all three of us are relatively young founders. It's so important to really get guidance from the right mentors, people who kind of done it before, are willing to kind of share like their mistakes so that you don't necessarily make the own. I think that's something that's so important. I think the fact that there is such a diversity of talent and interests and passions in the ecosystem is just so beneficial. And not only for entrepreneurs in general, but really just any sort of stakeholder in an ecosystem. I think everyone can really benefit from just the willingness and openness of people to help one another, like Kerlyne said.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Rhode Island has something special with their network of mentors, whether it's through college or through Rhode Island Inno or through any other platform, social enterprise greenhouse. There really is like an embedded network into the fabric of the Rhode Island ecosystem. And again, going back to Kerlyne's point of the benefits of diversity, I feel like over the summer, several articles have come out about these benefits of having diverse teams, and for you to turn a blind eye to that is pretty silly. So I love that that's been published, and that is true news. And then also, I'm sure Kerlyne's familiar with this, the discrepancy between funding for male-led companies and female-led companies. I believe female-led companies only get 2% of venture capital dollars, and that was as of 2019. And I think we're making 0.1 percentage point increases as the years go on. But that as well has been an issue. And I feel like Rhode Island really has a focus on female founders, which I love to see as I am a female founder.
Yeah, I'll jump in there real quick. There was a report that came out from PitchBook. I don't know if it was earlier this week or last week because time is slipping into itself. But as of the latest quarter, female founders have actually had the lowest funding ratio in the last 5 years. So it's pretty clear that female founders are being hit hardest by the pandemic and all the factors that come with the pandemic. So that's unfortunate, and hoping, as you said, Kerlyne, that Rhode Island can be a vanguard in changing that. Yeah, I'm glad that we started talking about Rhode Island's innovation community because you've all chosen to grow and scale your startups in the Ocean State. And I'm curious as to why you chose Rhode Island. What is special about Little Rhodey that makes you want to grow here?
So I went to school in Rhode Island, when I turned 17 years old, in my mom's little SUV, we traveled down to Rhodey and she moved me into Brown, and I grew up in Rhode Island. I always say that I grew up in Rhode Island. Had it not been for my time at Brown and the Providence community, there would have been so many things I didn't have access to, not only just like on a intellectual level, but also on a personal level. So much of the frameworks on social theory and anti-racism and Black feminism happened in this state. So it felt like just a natural evolution that when I was going to really scale KerlyGirl, you know, I've been doing KerlyGirl as a side hustle, as a hobby, and as a small business for years now. But when I wanted to really, you know, scale it and grow it, being in Rhode Island just felt really natural for me. And I always heard like this really great quote by one of my personal mentors, Barrett Hazeltine. And he always says, just go back to your roots. And for me, my roots is in two different places, not only in my, you know, community as a Black woman, but geographically for me, it meant Rhode Island and the Brown community.
Yes, I think you know, for my personal experience, I think it's a little interesting just because you know, I've had like two perspectives on like two different innovation ecosystems, so you can kind of like compare and contrast. You know, obviously like New York, Long Island, and obviously Rhode Island. And I think what really drew us, you know, to Rhode Island, especially, you know, what made us decide, you know, this is the place that to grow our business, and to scale our business, and to have our operations, and to have our team, was just really, you know, kind of touching upon my point before, just the unique you know, combination of having such a tight knit community, yet just such a concentration of so like talent and perspectives. You know, Rhode Island has so many leading institutions, educational institutions, research institutions, and to have like that amount of those amount of resources, you know, obviously investor money as well, yet still be so tight as a community, I think is something that's so rare to have an innovation ecosystem, and I think it's what really sets Rhode Island apart. You know, I think it truly is the, you know, the best place to build a business. You have all the resources you need, you have all the people you need, and I think, you know, especially having people that are willing and kind of cheering you on from the sidelines, I think is just so important, and what makes Rhode Island really the best, I think.
Yes, absolutely agree with both of your points. Just being surrounded by innovators, and I feel like Rhode Island absolutely prioritizes their entrepreneurs. They also offer like so many different opportunities for entrepreneurs to pitch or get involved. Specifically at Brown, that's where Kerlyne and I both really started our ventures. And over the last couple of years, they've had a lot of money put into their Nelson Center for Entrepreneurship. So they've been attracting these awesome young entrepreneurs. But even continued outside of Brown, I know Cox hosts the Get Started Rhode Island pitch competition every year, which is another awesome draw to Rhode Island. And I know they have like new centers, new like shared office spaces, kind of like WeWork setups. And Rhode Island has really proved itself to be the innovation hub. And obviously it has a ton of different colleges with their own entrepreneurship programs that kind of feed into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And then also a side note is you're going to get more affordable prices in Rhode Island than, let's say, New York. At least my experiences with lawyers and accountants. And I think that's also a huge draw as like a young startup without a lot of capital. So that's definitely a big draw to Rhode Island. And it also, sorry, another point. It's important to be, I think it's great to be a big fish in a small pond. And I think that Rhode Island kind of is a small pond size-wise. So it is nice to feel recognized.
Totally. And I'm glad you brought up the pricing thing, Rosie, because I think that that has been a major conversation lately when we're talking about the future of remote work and how that has the potential to maybe change how Rhode Island's economy even works. Some people have speculated that it'll be a boon for Rhode Island because basically rent is cheaper here. So you could find yourself a cheap apartment, even potentially buy a home, and then work for a company in another state. Or maybe investors will be used to negotiating term sheets over Zoom, so we won't feel like we have to go to where the money is. Do y'all have any predictions for how this is going to unfold over the next couple of years?
That is an interesting question. I think there will be a lot of positives, right? Hopefully, this is a learning lesson on that many of the like benchmarks and barriers that were that entrepreneurs face in terms of access to information. Hopefully that was destroyed along with the, with our past economy. One of the best things that happened is that people had more time. Information was more democratized. We were able to have a lot more workshops and events like this where you could come face to face with folks, and that was definitely appreciated. I just worry what it'll look like in the next 2 years because people of color already historically had issues with raising capital, and I don't know how deal flow looks like if you can't have that interpersonal and intimate interaction with folks. So many of the just connections I made within COVID-19, they predated March, and a lot of the connections I made were off strength of other connections I had made intimately. So I'm just a little bit worried in that respect. If the vacuum will still exist beyond just like the workshop environment. So yeah, sorry.
How do we change that? Kerlyne, in your ideal world, how would we change that to make sure that things don't stay insular if we're still all working remotely for the next year?
Oh, whoa, how would I change that?
Yeah.
Well, so I don't know. So I think within the Rhode Island ecosystem, there's a lot of opportunity to beyond just me, right? To just get to know more women of color founders. A lot of women of color founders I know, they're under 30, they're in school. It's relatively easy. Like we all know each other. And luckily with COVID-19, but also unfortunately, we've been getting a lot more press. So, I don't know. I think it's just a matter of reaching out and really being proactive with getting to know women of color founders. A lot of, it's not something you can necessarily workshop or teach too. So yeah.
Great. Well, here's hoping that this is providing some actionable takeaways for some folks in the audience. Rosie and Michael, do you have any predictions?
Yeah, so I think, for me, from, how I've kind of seen, the entire ecosystem, I personally am pretty optimistic, in terms of actually, Rhode Island's ability to kind of solidify itself as really being a hub for innovation. I think it's really just kind of, establishing the narrative that Rhode Island is a place to be, right? I think there's so many qualities, and I think obviously, we touched upon, cheaper prices and it's more affordable or living costs. And I think while that might be like an initial draw, I think that's great to, people like kind of come for that, but I think they'll stay for a completely different reason. And I, just for that fact, I think there's so many qualities, even geographically, right? Like, Rhode Island's in a very unique geographic position where it's really flanked in a short train ride away to two major cities, right? Both Boston and New York, and really having almost like the best of both worlds in a sense. I personally wouldn't be surprised if Rhode Island continue like solidify its position as, a very good place to be if you want to be an innovator. Yeah.
Yeah, not only as innovators is Rhode Island special, but even people who have more corporate jobs, I think it's a great place to be, and it has so much to offer. Obviously, the city of Providence, but you also have access to the water. Narragansett, Newport, Jamestown, to name a few. And yeah, just I think this whole shift with COVID-19, with this work from home culture, it will draw a lot of people to Rhode Island, given their proximity to the water, and like Michael said, the Boston and New York commutes aren't terrible. And yeah, it's a really one of a kind state with seasonal beauty.
100%. We're getting some audience questions, which I'm super excited to get into in a couple minutes here. A reminder to folks, you can keep sending in those questions and we will try to get to as many as we can at the end here. But first, I have a question for all of you. And for this one, you can dig as deep as you want to dig. It's really up to you. What is your biggest fear heading into 2021?
Yeah, so I think for mine, oh no, sorry, Kerlyne, you can go.
You can go. I went first beforehand.
Okay, sorry. So I think really, it's kind of a fragile fear, but something I think is also something I'm closely looking at, is really sort of the, I guess, progression and distribution of, the eventual COVID-19 vaccine. I think, it's really important for us to kind of at least get to a point where we're almost at normal. Obviously we have a new normal, but I think really for our economy to kind of bounce back and really to get consumer spending up to a point where our economy is booming again, I think the vaccine is really important. And I think my particular fear obviously is in the current administration, I'm not sure if we have the planning capabilities that are necessary to, I guess, make sure that something like this goes smoothly. I really think this is going to be one of the greatest supply chain challenges of our generation. There's so many just nuances of vaccine delivery in terms of having it like at sub-zero temperatures during delivery, making sure that things go smoothly, making sure there's a good supply and things like that. So I mean, that's something I'm closely monitoring, and it's something that I'm thinking about. And I think all of us are really keeping close track of. But yeah, that's something that I've been looking at.
Yeah, I think, my biggest fear is what does life look like in a pandemic state where we don't have a solution for COVID-19 and we'll have to continuously socially distance. At the nexus of the CPG market is people. Like people drive the innovation and the market needs. And when folks aren't socializing, when folks are in a fear state where they are not thinking about their needs in a creative manner, but they're thinking about rent or food, that really does curtail our market and how we can provide to folks. And I guess my second mini fear is just supply chain delays if we're going to be in a COVID-19 state, because there's a lot of guidelines that we have to follow in order to keep folks safe, but it may not match the needs or the driving needs within the personal care market, because a lot of folks are buying skincare and new hair care products because everyone's from the neck up. But what happens when we can't meet those needs because of new supply chain guidelines? That's been on my mind a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say my biggest fear heading into 2021 is just mental health across the board. I think this year just not being allowed for the social interaction has really hurt a lot of people. I mean, I'm sure there's a million other different categories of issues that people are running into as well, being back at home or in different situations, or kind of being uprooted from where they were living and their jobs that they did have and don't have anymore. And that's what I love about Michael's company, Cress. I really do think it's an awesome platform that does bring awareness and resources to people who are in these situations and need the help. And just a terrible time for anyone across the board, but especially people who have lost loved ones and who aren't able to be surrounded by friends and family to support them at this time. So it's important to reach out to your loved ones and set your grandma up on Zoom so that they can connect with their grandchildren.
Love that.
Yes. Yes, all of that.
All right. And on a more kind of forward-looking note, what is your number one goal heading into 2021?
Yeah, I think for us, it really was, kind of speaking back to what Rosie said, we're just in a very unprecedented time in terms of mental health. So many people need support, and we founded this company with the mission to, democratize access to mental wellness resources. So everyone, regardless of their circumstance, regardless of where you are, what you identify as, you can have access to mental health resources that help you self-care and help you enhance your mental wellness. And I think all the things that Rosie said are just so true, and just things that are occurring across the board. And I think it's something that has become really important. I think thankfully, I guess one caveat is that people are taking it more seriously. Mental health is something that is so important for everyone to consider and to really take care of. And obviously our goal is to, hopefully make our resources as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. Our entire team right now is motivated every day just by, I guess, the very real impact that we're making. And I think some of the best feedback that I get and Justin gets, just from people who are using our applications, whether it be physician, a young adult, just kind of thanking us, for creating a resource that is helping them through these tough times. I think, trying to get to as many people as possible with the resources is probably our greatest goal right now.
Yeah, same here. Our number one goal is, of course, growth. We're in the process of fundraising, so that way we can grow our brand from its, regional, just from its regional markets into more national markets. Folks love our products because we do cater to coilier textures, and we want to spread that message. So yeah, we definitely want to grow, and we're fundraising.
Yes, my goal is definitely similar to Kerlyne's, fundraising and launching. I mentioned earlier that I've taken pre-orders, but the official launch, I guess, will be in 2021. So hoping for a successful launch and getting awesome feedback from the product, but also getting information on repeat purchases and any type of feedback on the product. So I'm really excited for that.
All right. Cool. Thank you all so much. This has been an awesome conversation. And we have a bunch of audience questions. So I want to go ahead and dive into those. The first one is from Michael. It's pretty specific. Is your service providing clinical mental health through a telemedicine platform?
So I think the way we kind of describe our platform, I think we envision it as just another layer of support. So, we never encourage, individuals to, I guess, utilize our platform in lieu of, seeking, professional therapy from a psychiatrist or a psychologist. We think that is, tremendous. I think what really motivated us to create our solutions was that a lot of people came to us telling us that that was not something that they personally felt they wanted. They didn't feel comfortable, go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and we wanted to create just another sort of option for them that would be available, for those individuals who, wanted a more digital, I guess, way to kind of self-care and enhance your mental wellness. So I wouldn't necessarily classify ourselves as, I guess, like a clinical solution. It's just more of a another mental wellness support application that people can go to enhance their wellness.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. Next question, and we can kind of do just around the table, so each one of you can answer this as you'd like. Have your customer needs changed over time, and has the pandemic changed your customer profile?
Yeah, so I think, I spoke on this a little before, but I guess, COVID-19 has really sort of led us to buckle down almost. We've always kind of had this broad idea of, helping people's mental wellness, but I think what COVID-19 has really led us to do is, identify who exactly is, our target market in terms of people that we want to help now, right? So it was the healthcare workers initially in the beginning of the pandemic, and, as you touched upon, the young adults after, around like June and, May. And I think that was kind of, how it kind of led us to develop and, even doing pivots of our application to, be specifically designed for the populations that we wanted to help now. So I think that's sort of the effect that COVID-19 has had.
Yeah, this is a great question. So I think COVID-19 and definitely the Black Lives Matter uprisings, they've changed in terms of our customer profile. We've always had a brand vision and catering to folks with coilier hair and dark skinned folks, and that has always been integral in KerlyGirl's DNA. But I think the way that it changed it is that it actually made us feel, or made me feel a lot more just resolved in catering to folks with coilier hair, catering to folks that are dark skinned, and being a lot more political with our brand statement. You know, beforehand, we had always, you know, just really integrated it subtly in our marketing, but we really made it a mission to do community work all throughout, you know, Q2 and Q3, just reposting a lot of different trans and non-binary resources, reposting a lot of different like resources for folks that were home insecure. We really just got on that, and our social media actually became more than anything a community platform.
Yeah, I wouldn't say too much has changed with the Perky's product. I definitely now am looking into like other things to add on to the Perky's line, because currently right now we just have a sticky bra. So I've been kind of garnering more information on what else is necessary in that category. But one thing I did absolutely prioritize, it was on the list, but it became a priority to get the initial order in 3 different shades of nude, which was great, and I was able to accomplish that and also learn a lot from that. It was interesting because when I asked for like a darker shade of nude, the manufacturer was like, oh, the minimum order for that is 10,000. So it was interesting to see the like where the root of that could come from. But thankfully I negotiated it, and it was all 3 colors were able to be combined in my first 1,000-piece order. But it was also great to see my manufacturer, Platform 88, commit to supporting Black-owned businesses and offering mentorship and funding towards Black-owned businesses. So that was a great thing that came out of this.
That's really interesting to hear on my end. Like, whoa.
Oh,
The fashion is a really interesting space. We can talk about it off this call.
Have a whole other panel discussion on that.
Right.
I love it. The next question we have, this is a follow-up question to when we were talking about future-proofing different election scenarios. This week, I believe Joe Biden said he would waive student debt. Right now, only 11% of student loans are making payment on those loans, presumably loan holders making payment on those loans. If those loans are forgiven, what kinds of business opportunities will benefit?
Any business that's being started by somebody under 30 years old. I mean, if we're gonna just be honest and fair, I mean, millennials and Gen Z folks, they hold a good chunk of the student loan debt, and there's actually a new study that came up this morning saying that our generation, the millennial generation, we hold 4.2 times less wealth than our the baby boomer generation, and we only hold 4.2% of the overall wealth. That is really bad because we're the growing work economy beyond just entrepreneurship. Like we're the workforce, and we are in debt. Like that's not good. And while there is good debt, student loan debts, they've just become really overboard. You know, there's tons of studies saying that, you know, if your student loan debts are 15,000 or under, it actually incentivizes you to work harder, you know, invest more in the American economy. But once it's over that, it's really not good. And our average, I think, is around 30K. So vote for Joe Biden or vote.
I also feel like this student debt crisis could deter a lot of people from following their entrepreneurial passions. I fortunately, like, literally am living at home with my parents, and I'm lucky that they're here. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have been able to pursue Perky's. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. Without, you know, some assistance, you can't pursue your dream. And obviously, the student debt issue isn't going anywhere, and that's absolutely looming over millennials' heads. So I think that would be amazing.
Yeah, so I think yeah, I totally agree, with both Rosie and Kerlyne said. I think I'm going to say like a very similar something that I think it's almost like twofold in that, like Rosie said, I think if we were to eliminate student debt, I think it would really empower individuals to pursue something that they really want to do rather than something that is almost more practical in a sense. I know, I'm sure we all have friends who are at a they have to make a choice, right? Do I want like the high paying job that's not so much what I want to do, or do I want to go off and really chase my passions? And unfortunately, like the realistic scenario is that most of the times you're gonna have to choose the one that is able to like help you pay off your debt in a timely manner. So I think being able to, I guess, eliminate some of that debt, or at least give some debt forgiveness, I think would really allow, I guess, this new generation of innovators and entrepreneurs really chasing their interests and their passions. I think on the flip side, from businesses, I think the amazing part is that I think really the millennial and Generation Z, we're all I think for the most part very socially conscious, and I think it really could be like a great catalyst to almost empower socially conscious brands and really kind of elevate and prioritize, I think, socially conscious initiatives for enterprise and for companies in general, just because if they see that this is where the consumer spending is coming from this population, then hopefully they make it a priority. Like, if there's a brand that isn't that socially conscious, then people aren't going to purchase from that brand. And I think it'd be very great just culture shift in general.
100%. I think that's another thing that we could have a whole second panel discussion on. But if anyone wants to talk offline, hit me up. Next audience question. Today, Cambridge, Massachusetts was named the #1 place for you people interested in tech by Niche, a real estate site. Apparently, they don't know how expensive it is to live near Harvard and MIT. How can Providence position itself to appeal to startups who are looking at the new Cambridge?
Yeah, I think personally, I think what will be like a major driver of, I guess, almost establishing Rhode Island to Providence to the top of an ecosystem. I think actually, especially for some people, go to where the talent is, right? So it doesn't surprise me that Cambridge is Harvard and MIT. There's a lot of technology talent there, and it's concentrated. But I think people fail to realize that like Rhode Island has some pretty heavy hitter schools. We have Rhode Island School of Design, and I think that is, what is going to empower Providence. Like there is some really great talent, and you just think of Airbnb was started. Brian Chesky went to RISD. I think there is a tremendous amount of talent here, and I think once people realize that and they see like wow, like there's a couple of RISD designers in the Cress team, like they are beyond anything that they're tremendously talented. Our CTO is a Brown student. I think once people realize the talent is here, Rhode Island talent is like here to compete. I think people will come and innovation will come, and hopefully that will kind of really establish Rhode Island, Providence as a forefront and a leader in innovation.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo Michael's thoughts. The talent are here. When you think about Brown and RISD, or even just JRU, JRU is a food innovation hub, and that's why we have some of the best restaurants in the world. What I can say is that it's a matter for Rhode Island in keeping the talent. Like you have to retain talent, and so there should be a niche emphasis on new grads. Just like how do you support new grads, not only in the work economy, but also just like within entrepreneurship. Because we're just flooded with student loan debt, we're thinking about the money, which is sad because when you're 21 years old, you shouldn't be thinking about how you're going to be super productive to debt. But here we are with like household debt. So that's why I think a lot of great talent out of Brown and RISD, they're just going to New York, they're going to Boston, and they're going into consulting jobs right out of college.
I also feel like the pandemic could actually be better for Rhode Island because people won't have these like draws to New York and Boston because of their nightlife, or at least for the next couple of years. And I think that is a huge draw to those places, or because of the people in those cities, where now, whether you're in New York, Boston, or Rhode Island, you're going to just do a Zoom call. So I don't think people will need to prioritize location as much as they once were. And I'm sure we could think of creative ways to lure them into Rhode Island, because we have some great restaurants that shouldn't go unnoticed.
Yeah, I think more than anything, Rhode Island just should really prioritize a rebrand and being a youthful city. You know, we have, just like Boston, we have 5 schools: Brown, Risby, J.Wu, Providence College, and what's the last one? Am I forgetting it? Yeah, I am. But in PC, yeah. So I think it's just a matter of just like rebranding our state as just like in Providence, it's just like a college town. So yeah.
100%. Also, as someone who has lived in Boston for the last couple of years, Providence's nightlife is better than Boston's. I will say that right now. It's the one opinion that I will be clear to voice as a journalist. So there you have it. Next question from our audience. What resource info and other assistance from government or the nonprofit community would be helpful to operating or promoting your business or organization?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What resource information and other assistance from the government or the nonprofit community would be helpful to operating or promoting your business or organization?
Yeah, I think for us, in terms of I guess like government nonprofit assistance, it's like twofold. So I think so. One, like we were fortunate to get a grant from the Clinton Foundation, which is obviously a nonprofit, which is in turn allowed us to kind of do some philanthropic work, in Africa with some of our community partners, and the United Nations we're working with over there. So I think definitely the financial support I think is the root cause of would be very tremendous for many different businesses. I think more from the small business perspective. So my dad actually he's a small business owner of a jewelry store. So coming kind of seeing from his perspective, I think the type of like government assistance that would be very beneficial for him is for example, like just loan forgiveness. And I think like many things, I think small businesses are being hit very, very hard. Shops getting closed down, and I think having government resources that not only understand but kind of help tackle some of the problems as a result of some of the shutting down, I think would be very tremendous. So whether it be like there's small business loans, debt forgiveness and things like that.
Yeah, I think just not only for KerlyGirl, but when I think on a larger scale, just the Black women entrepreneurial economy, a lot of Black folks who were just fired or laid off because of COVID-19 are now seeking to start their own startups. And so there should be, I think, a lot more resources that are given in starting startups. There's a lot of grants and loans that are centered towards people like me who've been in the market for 2 years and have to sustain capacity, have to sustain, just their operational budgets. But there are a lot of people who are just starting and need that initial capital that I think the government can help on really building those funds. Also, Rhode Island has a National Black Business Association chapter, but so if anybody's a part of that that's on this panel, reach out to me. Yeah, I think there should just be within the Rhode Island economy a lot more consolidation of resources for Black-owned businesses, and there should be a lot more promotion towards younger Black folk.
Yeah, I feel like grants and accelerators are critical to keeping people in Rhode Island, or at least like catalyzing this entrepreneurship environment. I know there's a ton of opportunity for college students or students who are in college. And great that college students are going to be in college for their 4 years here, but to keep people and to retain people in the state of Rhode Island, I think it's important to extend that beyond graduation. And I know one Brown student, her name's Kristen, she started or co-founded a accelerator program called Envision, focused on females and people of color. And I think they were able to raise a good amount of money and started taking on teams kind of in my boat a couple years out of college. And I think that's just a great way to retain people in the area by offering it and not having that like in college requirement.
100%. I think we have time for one more audience question before we run up against time here. The moderator's intro, underlined the fact that COVID has exposed cracks in our existing society. What's an example of that from your perspective, and what advice would you give to a presidential transition team to address/move beyond that systemic problem in the future?
I think something that as I've been thinking of, and I think is very pressing in terms of what COVID-19 has highlighted. Really, were, I guess, socioeconomic disparities in terms of access to healthcare. I think that is something that just seeing, I guess, COVID-19 both infection rates and the rate of obvious severe illness after COVID-19. Minority groups have just been, very disproportionately affected. And I think that really goes to show that there are tremendous socioeconomic disparities in terms of, actually having access to not only affordable, but quality healthcare. And I think that's something that, it has to be addressed. Obviously, both the candidates have their own healthcare plan, but it is something that I think it is very real, and it is something that, it has to be solved. I think, obviously, the handling of this pandemic was not ideal. I think, many American lives were lost, and I think this really shows that there are many deficiencies in our current healthcare infrastructure. Just the way that it's set up that, really should be addressed in hopefully the next administration.
Yeah, I think just to kind of echo off of Michael's direction and how we cater to those who are most vulnerable in this society, I think there should just be a totally new lens on the presidential tone towards equity, and thinking about that framework when we think about policy. One brush policy doesn't work anymore for this country. People are in different places and different stages and come from different backgrounds and frameworks, and we should be considering that when we design new policy. I think COVID-19 definitely showed how weak we are in terms of thinking about policy, because there was the whole Black woman community became the caretaker of this country, and there was no catering to Black women throughout the last 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that so many socioeconomic disparities have come out or have been shown and visible through this pandemic. And I think it's really showed everyone that there needs to be change. And as I said earlier, it's important to vote, and not just vote in the presidential elections, but vote in all elections. Every single vote matters, but every single election also matters. And do your research, know what you're voting for and who you're voting for, and text your friends, tell them to vote, be on people and tell them to vote. And that's like really, truly the way where we could all make change.
Awesome. All right, thank you all so much. We've gone a little bit over time here, so I'll go ahead and start wrapping things up. But thank you to Rosie, Michael, and Kerlyne for sharing your insights. This has been an awesome discussion, and looking forward to seeing how things unfold for each of you over the next couple of months. Thank you to everyone who tuned in on your Wednesday afternoon. We so appreciate you spending it with us, even virtually. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our founding partner, Cox, one more time. This event truly would not be possible without you, and we so appreciate your support. All right. Bye, y'all.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.